Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Next week will be the last episodes of Season 2 before we take a break. I look forward to bringing you more amazing interviews in Season 3. I mentioned in a prior episode, but I would really love to hear any feedback you have about the show. Things you'd love to see more of, things you didn't like as much, anything at all that you have to share. You can always email suggestions to me at sarah@journeyforjasmine.com or message me on any of my social media accounts at journeyforjasmine. Today I am talking with Ella from The Joy of Sunflowers. She has 4 living children and 2 children in heaven. She went through 2 losses, including a blighted ovum and a miscarriage. In this episode, she talks about going through her losses, along with her journey learning how to parent her living children while still grieving her losses.
Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Ella. Ella, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a mum to 6. 4 of them are here on earth with us living, and 2 are in heaven.
Do you mind?
And I am, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and I run the Joy of Sunflowers, which is a sort of sisterhood community. And I have a podcast, and I'm doing a few more other things that I'm going to be hopefully bringing out soon. So yeah, that's me.
I had so much, I don't know if fun is the right word, but I really enjoyed being part of the Joy of Sunflowers. Like, it was nice being part of that community. I'd say, I don't know that fun's right because it's such a heavy subject, but like I enjoyed being able to talk with everybody.
Yeah, I think it's funny because like I found a lot of the time you'll be like, oh, I really enjoyed speaking to you. It was so amazing to meet you, and I'm so excited to but then you're like, but the reason we're here is really horrible. Like, are we allowed to say we're excited? But I think it's important. I think it's good that we have that like bit of excitement, and we say like that we're glad to talk to someone, even if it is about loss, because yeah, it can be hard as it is. But yeah, bring the joy.
That's exactly how I feel too. Every time I don't want to be like, well, it was so nice speaking with you about such a horrible thing. But yeah, but it really is, because it makes you feel part of a community, and it makes you feel, not alone. And like, there's somebody who understands how you feel.
Exactly.
So do you mind talking a little bit about your last story?
Yeah, I have shared it a few times, but I haven't actually I haven't been on anyone's podcast. So this is the first time I've been on someone else's podcast.
Oh,
so
wow.
I will go with this as best I can. But starting at the beginning, I actually had a dream, and that's sort of what started this whole experience. So I had a dream that I was in this sunflower field, and there was a little girl playing, and I knew she was my little girl. And so I sort of tried to move towards her, but every time I tried to get closer, she would sort of move further away. And we sort of kept like this for a little bit. And then all of a sudden she just kind of stopped, and I stopped, and she looked up at me and smiled. And then the sun sort of got brighter and brighter and brighter. And then everything got so bright that I woke up, And yeah, so I had the dream. And then from that point, I'd already had 3 kids at that point, and I was kind of, I thought we were done. We both thought we were done having kids. But yeah, we just were like, oh my gosh, like this is the sign, we need to have another one. And there was this little like thing in my head of I did want to have another kid, and it was before the dream, but I wasn't sure if my husband would be on side and if it was a thing for us. And yeah, so I had the dream, and I was like, this has to happen, like this is meant to be. And little did I know I was actually already pregnant. And so I took a pregnancy test, and yeah, we got excited, and we started planning and doing what we usually do when we're pregnant. We started like decluttering and like, yeah, we're going to make sure everything's sorted out and organized and perfect for the baby, and we're going to plan. We hadn't really been that organized with our first 3 pregnancies, and so we kind of wanted to be more, more with it. We usually plan, but then it just didn't happen, and so we were like, no, this time's going to be different. We're going to be amazing. And yeah, like a week or so later, I started bleeding, and that was the day before my birthday. And when that happened, I was like, this is it. Like, this is the end of the pregnancy. And I got really upset, and my mum, my husband was just like, oh, well, you don't know, like it could be anything. Like, women bleed while they're pregnant sometimes, and it happens. And so I was like, okay, I won't worry until like unless I'm bleeding tomorrow on my birthday. And I was bleeding again the next day. And so I cried more, obviously, just like on my knees, just ugly cry. And then my mum again came in and said, you don't know, it could be fine. And so I was like, okay, I'll just sort of leave it. And I did stop bleeding the next day. I didn't have any more blood, but I just felt really uncomfortable and unsure of everything. And so I was like, I need to actually talk to a medical professional because I just don't know. And before that, I was very adamant about not having any medical people involved because I'd gone through 3 pregnancies. And so I was like, I'm confident I'm not going to have any problems and there's going to be no worries. And like the first 2 pregnancies, I was terrified about miscarriage because people had told me, first 12 weeks, it's a worry thing. And then my 3rd pregnancy, I was like, yes, I've got this down pat. I can do this children thing. And so it just wasn't on my radar at all. I wasn't going to see a doctor. So yeah, that's why it took me the 2 days to actually call a doctor. Anyway, I called the doctor, and I wasn't really wanting to go in, and everyone was doing phone appointments at that point because it was, it was 2022 in like May. And yeah, so they were still doing phone appointments a lot. I don't know if they're still doing them now because I haven't really seen a doctor since much. So, but yeah, so I spoke to them on the phone. I just said, look, I'm bleeding. I think something's not right. And the doctor on the phone was actually like pretty sure I'd miscarried already. Like, she was acting like it was a done deal, like I was miscarrying. I had miscarried. And so yeah, she was like, you need to go for an ultrasound. I think that's the best course of action. So yeah, we went for an ultrasound. My husband went in with me, and we got there late that day. So it was kind of it was really awkward being in there. And when he was doing the ultrasound, he was really like quiet, as they often are. And then he sort of came out with, I don't see a baby, but there's a gestational sac. Congratulations. And I was like, what? Like, what is that? So, okay, there's no baby, but I'm pregnant. So he was like, congratulations, you're pregnant. But yeah, there's no baby in there right now. And he was like, but that doesn't mean anything. It's probably just too early to tell. And I was thinking, well, I'm about 6 weeks. I should be about 6 weeks, if not more. And I was like, I've never, ever gone into a scan like this one and not seen a baby. So I was like, okay, what do we do from here? And he was like, look, you come back next week, and, we should see baby then if we, and he didn't really say if we don't see baby. He just said we should see baby then. And so I sort of felt very dissatisfied. And I mean, already I felt like something wasn't right and this wasn't going to happen. And I said to my husband, I don't know. And he was just like, well, I think he was just super rushed because we got there late and the whole place was packed, and you know, he obviously was just brushing us off, and I was like, yeah, like maybe I did see the baby, I think I did see something. And so, you know, you just have that thing playing on your mind of like, no, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be there, it's great. So I spent a week like worrying, but also convincing myself like everything would be fine and I would see a baby. And it was like that 2-week wait that everyone says is really horrible. It really did feel like ages, that 1 week. And yeah, so that 1 week went, and I said to my husband, you know what, don't come to the scan, because he was really busy, and we had this like olive harvest on the farm I was working on, that we caretake, sorry. And he said, okay, are you sure? You like, you know, I don't know if this is the right thing to do. And I was like, no, it's fine. I'm just going to see the baby and everything's going to be wonderful. You know, you stay with the older kids here and they'll help you do the olive harvest. And I'll just take our youngest, Ethan, who was under 2 at the time. And my mum said she'd take me. So I went with her. But on the drive, my son fell asleep. And so when we arrived, I said to her, you know what, just stay in the car. Like, he's asleep. I don't want to wake him up. He's quite, you know, calm and relaxed. The last thing we want is like a screaming toddler in there, you know, because he's been woken up. And I was like, so, you know, he's quite happy and there's no point. I mean, I'm going to be fine. Everything's going to be great. I'm going to see the baby. And it's just became this sort of mantra, right? I went in and I lay on the table, and then he said, you know, there's no baby. And he said, you know, it's blighted ovum. And I was like, what the? And then everything kind of felt like, you know, in those movies where everything goes quiet and it's sort of like you don't hear anything. I think he explained to me what a blighted ovum was, but I didn't remember a word he said because, like I said, it was like the movies. And at that point, I was just kind of, you know, in shock. And I remember the last part of the conversation with him, which was, he was sort of like, are you okay? Like, have you got someone? Well, he didn't say, are you okay? He said, have you got someone to take you home? Have you got someone to take care of you? Are you, you know, are you going to be on your own, or have you got people around? And I was just like, yeah, I've got people around. My mum's in the car and everything's great. Like, smile on my face. I felt really weird. They were looking at me like I was weird. I remember that whole moment just feeling really surreal, like over the top. I'm like, I'm the same as I was when I came in, except I'm not, because you've just told me something horrible. So yeah, I sort of just was like that. And I thought, maybe I'm going to be okay. As I sort of walked out of the room, I was like, I'm okay. Like, I'm not feeling broken. I'm not feeling like really upset. I think I'm going to be okay. And I sort of walked past the desk. And as I got to the door, I sort of felt it a little bit. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to cry here. I don't want to cry in a waiting room. So I sort of opened the door and like got out there, and I was like, okay, there's my mum's car. I can get there. Got to my mum's car, sat down. I was like, no, actually, I think I'm going to be fine. And then she asked me the question, are you okay? No, I wasn't. I just burst out into tears, like full on ugly cry. And she was like, okay, what's happened? What is it? And, you know, when I finally got to the point where I was, you know, okay enough to answer, he said it was a blighted ovum. And she was like, what is that? Like, any normal person, you know, doesn't know what that is. So obviously I took to Google and explained it all to her, and explained it to myself at the same time, because I didn't know what it was either, because I didn't hear a word he said. And yeah, so then it was driving back home, calling the doctor. The doctor tells me that, you know, it is what it is. I've got a couple of options, the great options that we all get given. That it's like, seriously, can I have a different one? Like another option?
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Like, I don't like any of these options.
No, can I have the other one where I have my baby and take it home? But yeah, she gave me these options, and I was like, well, they all sound crud, so I'll go with the natural option. I was like, how long does a natural take? And she said 3 weeks. I was like, I can do 3 weeks. Like nothing. That'll be fine. Oh dear. Boy, was I wrong. Hindsight is so horrible, isn't it? So after getting off the phone with her, I was like, okay, 3 weeks. I told my husband, this is what's going to happen. And we sort of went along with that. And I fell into a deep, deep pit of just depression because it was just awful. I was just waiting for this thing to happen. I didn't know when it was going to happen. And obviously I'd lost my baby, and I was so just distraught. I didn't know that this could happen. It wasn't on my radar. It was just this new experience. And I was like, this is insane. And I was just so miserable. And I remember just feeling so broken. And my husband said to me at one point, like just when I'd started to sort of start bleeding, because I started bleeding sort of on and off, on and off. And in that moment, he sort of said to me, you need to be okay now. Like, we need you. Like, the kids need you. I need you. You need to be okay. And I was like, I know. And in that moment, I felt so guilty. And I knew that they needed me. But at the same time, I was like, I can't be there right now. I can't do those things right now, but I want to. And I want to get there. And so I was like, okay. And I tried to find ways to get myself active and get myself moving. And I joined this like online virtual event, which was like cleaning your house. But it wasn't set to come on for a bit. So before I sort of go into that bit, I had the loss first, like the actual delivery. So I joined that thing in hopes that I would at some point get active. But I was still miserable and I was still waiting for this thing. So when it did happen, I'd convinced myself that little bit of blood on and off was like it. And I was like, wow, this isn't a heavy period. This is a light period. It's fine. But then one night I was on the couch and I sort of felt this pain, like this discomfort. And I was like, what is this? This is really uncomfortable. Oh, like, I don't like it. And so I sort of moved around on the couch a bit. My husband was actually putting the kids down. So, they were sort of taken care of. And I was just on the couch on my own in the living room. And it just sort of built. And so I was like, this isn't getting better. And then it sort of got worse and worse and worse and worse. And then I was like, oh no, I know what this is, because I've had 3 kids. I know exactly what this pain is. Are you freaking kidding me? I don't have a baby. I'm not going to have a baby at the end of this. And this is what I'm going through right now. I'm going to have like actual labor right now. This is insane. I got down on my hands and knees and I went through the motions of labor. And, that's something that they don't tell you. Like, the doctor did not tell me that I would be experiencing labor. She did not tell me that I would have to go through labor pains and birth something. So I'm on the floor and I'm trying to be really quiet because my kids are being put down to sleep. And I'm just trying very hard. I was crying so much. And when my husband eventually came in, and I think it was probably about half an hour, I'm not actually sure about timing. I think altogether it was about 45 minutes, like from the moment I realized I was in labor to the moment that I delivered it. So he came in, he was like, it's okay, you're doing really well. Like, I'm here. And he sort of rubbed my back and I'm like on my hands and knees, like crying. And then I felt this like urge to push, and I did. And it was the ovum, the blighted ovum thing, sac, whatever you want to call it. And it sort of came out, and I remember like feeling like a pop. And I asked my husband later if he heard anything, and he was just like, no, it wasn't like an audible pop. It was like literally a sensation feeling that felt so intense that I felt like I heard it, but apparently it wasn't. something that you could hear. So so I had that. And then I was just a mess, like crying so bad, like the bad actors that you see in like sitcoms, like really, really bad. Now I've got to do a disclaimer, and I tell this disclaimer every single time. My husband doesn't deal well with crying. He has this safety sort of mechanism from childhood where when he sees someone crying, he actually finds it funny, like really funny. So yeah, especially when it's like ridiculously terrible crying, like in the movies. So I could feel him trying not to laugh. Like he was working so hard, bless him, right? So I could feel this, and I started laughing. And he was like, "Are you okay? You're laughing. Why are you laughing?" And I'm like, because you're trying not to. Like, and I remember in that moment before we had that laughing bit, I couldn't get off the floor. I felt so sad and so broken. I was like, I actually can't get off the floor. All I want to do is get off this floor and get this thing off of me. I need to get to the bathroom. And when I laughed, it broke it, and I was able to get up. And so in that moment, I loved my husband so much. I was like, the whole reason why you laugh when people cry is for this moment in time. It's a blessing. You're laughing. It's a blessing. Because like we'd gone through years of him like having moments where he laughed at me when I was crying, and I was just like, "You're so insensitive," but really, it's a thing, right? And he hates that it's a thing for him. He would rather actually experience it with me, right? And so he was just like, "This is so weird." I just and when I finally got into the bathroom and took everything off, I took pictures, obviously, because that's what you do, take a picture of it. I felt like it was really weird at the time, but I did obviously after the fact realize that it's all you have when you go through a pregnancy loss. Like the stuff at the end is that's it. That's the pregnancy. That's the baby. That's all you've got. So I took a picture. And for anyone who does listen to my podcast and knows about my story, I finally found out what happened to the ovum, because I didn't know. I just told my husband to deal with it, and apparently he just flushed it. So there you go. It got flushed.
Well, at least you know now, right?
I didn't know for so long. Like I kept like saying to people, like, I don't actually know what happened. Maybe I should find that out. So yeah, I did find out, and it got flushed down the toilet.
Well, I guess it's one of those questions that you're glad you know the answer to, right? But
yeah. I originally I'd wanted to freeze it. I actually said to him, "Oh, what do we do with it?" Like he was like, "What do we do with it?" And I was like, "Let's freeze it." And he was like, "Well, we're not going to eat it." Like
you're like, well, that's not why I want to freeze it. Like it just feels weird to. Yeah. Hey.
And he was just like, well, I don't want to put it in the freezer for someone to get freaked out about later. I mean, what happens if we have a guest and they open the freezer and they're like, "What's that?" And you're just like, "Oh, it's just my blighted ovum."
I mean, I guess I understand, but it's like, I mean, how many people do you have over that's really gonna like open your freezer? And then you can just be like, "Oh, that's just something personal." Like, I don't know.
I mean,
But it is one of those things, like I feel like, doctors don't prepare you for like, what do you do with it? What are your options? Like, I mean, can you have it cremated? Can you have it buried? I mean, like, do you have options? They don't tell you.
exactly. And like I went to the doctor, like the hospital, a few weeks after I gave birth to the ovum thing. because I was not well, like I had a flu thing. I actually was worried it was retained placenta or something retained. And so we went in, and when I was in there, they were like, "Oh, well, did you keep the blighted ovum and get it tested?" And I was like, "What? No one told me I could get it tested. No one said I could keep it, and I should have put it in the freezer, and then I could have used."
These are like the things that they need to be telling people, you know?
Yeah, like put it in your freezer and then we can test it.
Yeah, because you probably wouldn't even think about it. I mean, I wouldn't have. I would just be like the same as you. Like, what do I do? Like, I don't know.
Well, yeah. And like, for so long, I was like, well, what even is like, I couldn't wrap my head around what a blighted ovum was. I was like, was there a baby? Wasn't there a baby? And, there was a baby. They can actually test the ovum and tell you the sex of the baby and tell you like if there was any abnormalities with the baby. But yeah, like, so it took me a while to like really let that sink in that it was something, you know?
I feel like
So,
too, like, like you mentioned earlier, most people have never heard of a blighted ovum before. And then, for people who have, it is made to seem like it's not a baby, that it's just like a thing
yeah,
in you. It's like, it's diminished.
exactly. Like if in my mind, egg, sperm, meet together, that's conception, right? And we actually have scientific evidence now that shows us that as soon as that happens, life is formed. And so that's life, that's a baby, regardless of anything else. And with a blighted ovum, it just doesn't develop. It just doesn't get past that point of being able to actually see the baby thing. So there you go.
Yeah. And I feel like people treat it the same as like a chemical pregnancy, where it's like, well, it was just a quick positive, and then yeah, that's not a real pregnancy. It's like, yeah, they're all real pregnancies, okay?
Yes. Oh, the chemical pregnancy upsets me the most. And another one that I've really been getting into at the moment is the IVF. Like
Oh, the
where,
embryo loss?
yeah, like it didn't stick. It's like that's your baby. Like that's why you're so upset about it. It's okay to be upset about it. Like so many women have talked to me and said, oh, it didn't stick and I was so disappointed. And it's like, it's okay that you're hurting. Like that's your baby that you lost. And like that's a loss, legitimate loss. It's okay. And I feel like it's just discredited as, oh, well, it didn't stick, it wasn't real or whatever. But it's, I mean, one of the ladies I spoke to is an embryologist, and she actually is embryologist. I don't know. She actually said that they're the first babysitters of these babies, and they're just looking after the embryos, so if they're considering themselves the first babysitter, they consider those embryos babies.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think it's so sad that people feel like they can't grieve that because other people tell them they can't, or that wasn't real, or that, like, that's just mean. I'm sorry.
I totally agree. And like, I mean, a lot of the time with those losses, like it happens within a couple of days or like within a week, like in terms of the IVF. And yeah, it's just discredited, but those hopes and dreams and everything attached to that is still very valid and very real. And it's sort of getting to that point of having that validation and realizing and acknowledging the life that was there.
Right. Now, I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier, because it's something I struggled with too, about, going through a loss when you already have living children at home and having to, not being able to pick yourself back up, but having to pick yourself back up. That's so hard. Like,
Yeah.
so how long do you think that took you to, kind of navigate that?
Yeah, so it took a while. So look, when I first had the loss, my mum was actually around. They were sort of living on the farm that we're at. initially. And so my mum kind of like took charge, and it was a blessing, but it was also a semi-curse in a sense, because it allowed me to fall more so. And I've spoken to a lot of women, and I know that pit, you can still fall into it, but I know what kind of person I am, and if I didn't have the option, like, I don't feel like I would have fallen quite as far for quite as long. But at the same time, I don't know, so I'm just going by what I think would have happened. But I fell far and deep. It was so bad. And people told me the same thing that most of us have heard when we have kids before we have a loss, and that is, oh, just be grateful for the ones you have. Just be grateful for your children and spend time with them and be grateful for them. And it's like, you can love and be, so grateful for the children you have, but also be completely devastated for the one you've lost. And that's something I learned through the experience. And I didn't feel the depth of gratitude I had for my kids after loss I'll reword that. I didn't feel as much gratitude for my children before loss that I did after. Like, having experienced loss just, increased that gratitude tenfold. I was grateful for them before, but there was just so much more after loss. Because you just realize how much of a blessing they are and how much of a miracle life is, because, you realize that it's not a given, and, that 1 + 2 doesn't necessarily equal 3.
Right. Yeah. And I hate comments like that. Like, you want all your children. You don't just want the living ones. You want all of your children to be here. And it doesn't mean that you don't love them and aren't grateful for them, but it's really hard to grieve the one that should be here while also being completely present and fully there for all the other ones. Like, because you're never the same person again.
No. Look, I fully embrace the person I am now. Like, the reason why I can laugh and like not cry while I'm telling my story and be okay is because I've actively moved through the grief. Like, I don't feel the pain anymore. Like, I don't feel it, because I've moved through it. And honestly, when I think of my babies in heaven, I smile. Like, I'm happy, like, because I love them, and I know I love them, and I know they existed, and they've made a profound impact on the world, because they live on through me. They live on through my hands and my heart. I'm continuing their life through my work, through living myself. I may not get to have them here, and as a Christian, I get to know that I have them when I die. So, that's another thing that helps, having some kind of anchor, right? So, yeah, I think it's a hard thing to have kids living and then have one die, and then have to like be a parent to those living children, because you feel the guilt. You feel all the guilt of like not being there for them because you're so upset about the ones that you've lost. And I think it's one of those things where you just have to remember that if someone had a living child who died, you wouldn't tell them, oh, well, just be grateful for the other child you have. And you wouldn't say that to them, because it hurts, and that living child that they had, the one that died, that child has got memories. Like, there's memories of them and all the experiences that they had with them. It's the same with a pregnancy loss, because we all have memories, and we all have these dreams and hopes for this baby that we're pregnant with. As soon as that strip turns pink, we're just like, all these like things that could possibly happen, we imagine it. I imagined my babies being held by my son. I imagined them playing. I imagined them running around. I imagined, the younger kids trying to play with the baby. And I imagined all those things and what that baby was going to be like. I imagined that baby was the one in the field with the sunflowers. That you can't just like diminish that and say, well, at least you have living children.
It's just, yeah, when I just think that those people have never been through loss, because if they had, they would understand that it's not something you can just write off.
Oh, I have actually experienced some people who have experienced loss, who have said that, surprisingly, right? But it was just because I think they had to harden their heart. They had to harden themselves because it was so long ago that they went through theirs, and there just wasn't the support. And they later talked to me about their loss, and they cried. Like, they were so upset and distraught about it. And that's because they never actively moved through it. They were never able to have the support to move through it because there just wasn't any back then. We're talking 20 years ago. The communities that we're seeing today have only really come about in the last sort of, I want to say 10 years, because I know one of the ladies I've spoken to built hers 10 years ago, started hers. But really, I mean, it's only really sort of flourished and grown in the last 5 years and become less taboo-ish.
That just makes me sad too, that, there's people who have had to go through it, who never had support, who could never talk about it, who had to just pretend it didn't happen. It makes me sad, because it obviously has such a big impact on all of us. And to think that you didn't have permission to talk about it, I hate that.
Oh yeah. No, it's just disgusting, really, when you think about it in terms of like culture and our society. But I think it comes down to the validation, and whether society decides that we value the unborn life, and whether we see it as a life, and that's the real issue and the crux behind everything. And it's just understanding, and every woman in this community knows that life is valid, and it is a life, and it is meaningful, and it's just kind of getting the understanding to spread so that culture can change, so that society can change, and then we can have that understanding that there really is a life.
Yeah, exactly. And also, if it could stop being a political issue instead of a emotional and family issue, that would be great too.
Yes. Yeah. Can we stop using it as ammunition
right
for politics? Like, yeah. I mean, it's pretty, like I said, like, it's been scientifically, proven, like, when life begins. So I don't understand why we're even still arguing about it. It's crazy.
So how did you decide that you were ready to try again after your loss?
Well, that's a great question. After my first loss, I was like, we need to try again. I need to have a baby now. Like, I have to have a baby now. Like, we're just going to go again, and I'm going to have a baby. So we did get pregnant again. And that was in sort of September time. And that was around the time where I watched this organizing Get Organized HQ thing to try and get myself back into the rhythm of doing things in my life. While I was watching that, I was like, oh, this would be so great if I actually cared. But I don't, because my baby died, and I really don't care about cleaning my house. But you know what? After a while, it kind of did get me going. Like, I was like, oh, maybe I will do this thing in my house. And I started doing the cleaning and like putting things away and getting rid of stuff. And it was great. And I was like, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if this actually existed for what I'm going through right now? And as I sort of started messaging women, I found out I was pregnant again. And I was like, oh gosh, like, can I do this pregnant? And then within a week, I started bleeding. And I was like, dang it, again. And I got to say, during that pregnancy, I was kind of like, I'm going to lose this one. Like, I kind of already had it in my head, like, I'm going to lose this baby. It's not going to stick. Like, it's just going to, it's going to go. Like, it's just not going to happen. And, I wasn't one of those women who said, oh, it was my fault because I willed it to happen. don't believe that, guys. Please, if you're one of those women, stop it. Okay? No, you did not will it to happen. It just happened. It sucks and it's crappy, but it's not you willing it to happen. But, you know, I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. But yeah, so I lost that baby, and yeah, but luckily I'd already set everything in motion, so I didn't have a choice to like, I didn't have the opportunity to like be really depressed and sink into my hole about it. You know, I was already contacting women, and I had women contacting me and saying, yes, I want to do this event and I want to be in this thing and I want to talk to you. And I was like, great, I'm going to do this and kind of be half sad and miserable at the same time. Awesome. And yeah, so I just carried on talking to women and, you know, being upset. And yeah, and then I got pregnant again, which was shocking. And I'd already said to my husband after the second loss, I was like, you know what, if we get pregnant again, one, if we lose that one, I'm not doing it again after that, because I'm just not doing it. But I'm going to also enjoy and embrace the pregnancy regardless of how long it lasts, because I don't want to be miserable the whole time like I was this time. I want to enjoy the pregnancy as long as it, you know, it's there, because, you know, I want to give that baby all the love that I can possibly give it, you know, in this moment. So yeah, that's what I did. I embraced my pregnancy, and there was a lot of times of worry and stuff, especially talking to women about loss. That was pretty intense. Some of them were like full-term losses, and I was like, great, I'm not going to worry about this loss now.
I found that really hard too. Like, I'm like, I can't hear some of these stories right now, like infant loss, like late loss. I'm like, I can't. I had to like take a step back during pregnancy for sure.
Yeah, I didn't take a step back. I went full on in, because I'd already signed myself up for this thing and I already gave it a date and everything. And so I was like I talked to like, gosh, I think like all of the women I spoke to was about 75 people altogether that I spoke to in the space of like 3 months, or 4 months.
Busy.
So yeah, it was pretty full on. So yeah, so about like 75 people, but only like 69 did I actually record and put forward, because some of them had to withdraw because of various reasons, like having baby or splitting up with their husband. And yeah, there was a lot of different things that happened to people before we got to the recording stage. But yeah, so that was interesting going through that time of pregnancy after loss and like speaking to people about it. But during that time, I found that was the most active I was moving through loss. And I really didn't want to have the baby and be upset about the ones I'd lost, because, you know, I'd spoken to women who had gone through pregnancy after loss, and when they had their baby, they said it was really hard because they felt like they were looking at the one they'd lost, you know. And there's been people who weren't, you know, who didn't feel better after having their rainbow, and because it doesn't replace the one you lost, because they're all individuals, they're all different, right? So I was kind of terrified about that, and I didn't want that to happen. So I worked really hard to try and work through grief while I was pregnant and listening to all these stories. And yeah, it was an interesting experience.
There's nothing like being forced to work through it too, right? By listening to everybody. Like
yeah.
My last pregnancy too was unexpected, and I had, you know, started a bunch of like things that I was doing, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, this is really hard to keep up while I'm pregnant. So I feel you there. Like it was hard. I'm like, I don't have the time or the energy for all of this right now. Why did I sign myself up for all this?
Yeah, because you didn't know you were going to get pregnant again.
Well,
and
yeah,
it was going to end in a baby. because I was just like, I took on so much, and I was just like, I was just not expecting to be pregnant while doing this. And, and luckily, like, the due date was like after the event and everything, but the due date actually fell on the same day that I miscarried, that I delivered the egg sac, which was the 20th of June. And that was kind of hard for me because I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. That's a bit weird. Like, I don't know. And, I'd heard a lot of people say that, there's certain trigger dates that, are quite hard, and, it's a painful time. And I was like, okay, how is this going to be? And I talked to a few different women about triggers and about like having hard days and stuff, and like, the fact that I started bleeding my birthday and all that. And one of the ladies I spoke to, Bella Hilton, she said to me, I lost my baby on my birthday, and she told me this horrific story that was like, it was like movie worthy. Okay, she went through this loss, and then there was like a mariachi band that serenaded her in front of this whole room of people in this dining hall, right? Because her husband had set it up before they knew they were miscarrying. And so she walks in, she's like a mess, she's so upset, she sits at the table, there's this mariachi playing at her for her birthday, and she's sitting there like, what is going on? Like, what is this? She's like crying her eyes out. Everyone thinks she's crying because she's so happy that she's being serenaded on her birthday. And she was like, I laugh about it now, but it was horrible.
That really does sound like it was in a movie.
Yeah, like, because you just don't, that's just awful, right? And we both just kind of laughed a little bit because it's unreal. And she said, and I reclaimed my birthday, and I enjoy my birthday. And just her saying that actually just switched something for me. And I was like, okay, well, if she can do it, and she had that experience, I think I could do it. Like bleeding's pretty bad, but being serenaded kind of adds a whole nother level to it. So yeah, I wasn't triggered. I was not triggered by that day, but luckily Grace actually came the day before. So that day, that 20th is still, the day I had the ovum thing. But yeah, she actually came the day before. So yeah, but when I did have the 20th, I was fine. I
like that idea of reclaiming it. Jasmine was actually born same month as my birthday, so not the same day, but like a couple of weeks before my birthday. And so now I pretty much just hate the whole month, including my birthday. So yeah, I do like that idea, reclaiming it and not just letting it always be a sad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, once you know that you can, you don't have to be triggered. You don't have to experience, this horrible feeling and this dread. You don't have to be in grief and mourning all the time either. When you start realizing that those things, you don't have to do those things, right? It kind of sets you on a new path, and that kind of active healing. And I thought, oh, but if I get through this, then wouldn't I be detaching myself from my baby? But no, because your grief is not your baby. The grief, not your grief, don't own it. Sorry, don't own it. The grief is not your baby.
I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. It's not your baby. All the pain, all that misery is not your baby. Your baby is love, because you love your baby, and your baby loved you and loves you, no matter where the baby is now. So
yeah, I think that's important to talk about, because I think sometimes we think like we're not grieving enough or not grieving the right way. So then we think that means we don't love them, but they're two separate things. Like, the amount you grieve doesn't correlate to how much you love your baby.
No, And that's the thing, isn't it? Like, you know, I mean, at one point I was like, yeah, I'd spoken to a few women who were like, oh yeah, I do all these things to honor my baby. You know, I buy a birthday cake for someone else, and I do this and I do that. And I was like, well, I don't do any of that. Does that, like, is that bad? Like, does that make me like not good like, to my baby? You know, am I not honoring my baby enough? Like, how do I honor my baby? Do you honor babies? Like, so I think that's the thing. Like, you have to do what's right for you and your family, you know, and for your baby, you know, and that might look like putting on some weird, you know, virtual event. It might look like doing a podcast. It might look like taking a walk and looking up at the sky and just enjoying the walk. It might look like sitting at home and saying a prayer. It might look like a lot of different things, but you're still honoring your child regardless.
Yeah, and none of them's like right or wrong. It's just what feels right to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the guys I was speaking to, he was just like, every time I say my child's name, like that, I feel like that's me honoring my child. So, you know, it really is just anything that you feel, you know, and you can place that on it. You don't have to like be like, oh, well, what do I feel honors my child? Just pick something and be like, that's the way I'm going to honor my child. Done. Then you don't have to like be full on about it and be like, oh, I'm not good enough, and like feel the guilt, because you've already chosen a pathway. You've chosen something, and that's another thing. You can take control. That's your control. You can take control of the way you're going to honor, the way you're going to experience connecting with your child, or feeling like you are doing something to honor your child. You don't have to do it any way someone tells you to do it.
Yeah, and you can change it every year. If you want to do something different, if you want to, you know, you can do whatever you want. You're in control of it, like you said.
Yeah.
So if people wanted to find more information about you, where would they go for that?
Well, you can check me out on Instagram, because I'm there at the Joy of Sunflowers. And you can also have a look at my personal kind of Instagram space, which is Hey Beautiful Mama. Yeah, I'm open to messages. I, you know, private message people sometimes, and people private message me, and yeah, and you can comment on anything. And yeah, you can check out the podcast, which is on pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Again, the Joy of Sunflowers. And yeah, that's pretty much the only way you can really reach me, other than email, thejoyofsunflowers@gmail.com. And we're setting up I'm setting up some other things at the moment, so, yeah, a few bits and pieces. I'll be sharing those. I will share those. I'm not going to share them here, because otherwise I'll like go on a tangent, because there's so much I'm trying to do right now. But I will be sharing all of that, and I'm very excited to share it with everyone. So hopefully, yeah, keep an eye on my space if you're wanting to know more.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me as well.
Thank you so much, Ella, for sharing your story with us. Learning how to parent after loss can be a really difficult task. If you already had living children before your loss, it can be hard to be 100% present for them, but still allowing yourself the space that you need to grieve. Sometimes we can be afraid to be sad or to cry in front of them. Or we end up pushing our grief completely away and not dealing with it at all because we want to be there fully for our children. Basically, it's just really, really hard to be both present and also grieve properly sometimes. When we lost Jasmine, I had my son at home, who was 3 at the time. When I came home from the hospital, I just wanted to lay there and cry and do nothing. And it was really hard to pick myself up out of that grief. But my husband gently reminded me that my son needed me and that he needed his mom. And that helped kind of pull me back out. So now we're 6 years after losing her, and I've had a lot of time to learn how to parent all of my children throughout the ups and downs of grief, along with also learning how to still parent Jasmine, even though she isn't here. It's all a learning process. It's not something we learn overnight. It definitely takes some trial and error. Just remember, if you ever feel like you can't handle things or need additional help, please reach out for support for whatever it is that you need. You don't have to try to navigate this alone. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more lost and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.